Hello and welcome to my AET journey. This is a overview of my time and my experiences within the Adult Education and Training program at Colorado State University. I am including here a sort of a synthesis, if you will, of my various experiences within the AET program, what I was able to accomplish within the AET program, and how I plan to move forward once the AET program is completed. So before we get started, I wanted to quickly cover with you some of the things that I will be mentioning within this presentation. First of all, I wanted to share with you my intentions for entering the program, sort of where I was at professionally and personally when I entered this program, and what inspired me to enter into the AET program. And I also want to share basically how this program has changed my outlook on my profession, how it has changed the direction I have chosen to take my career in. I also plan to speak about how this program has impacted me personally, and how it has changed my views on not just my field, but also in how I conduct myself as a leader, in more of a community and global scale. And then also, not only do I want to talk about how this program has affected me and changed my outlook professionally and personally, but also, philosophically towards the field of education, specifically adult education, and how my philosophy will continue to evolve going forward. And I also want to speak about how this program has impacted my plans presently and going forward, especially over the next 5 to 10 years. So the first point I want to touch on is my exact motivation and what compelled me to enter the AET program. I have worked in financial services for the past going on 8 years, and in that time I've had a fairly significant degree of success within the field, and this has enabled me to look at financial services in more of an overhead perspective and more of a managerial perspective. What this has allowed me to do is identify the qualities that make someone successful within the field, and precisely what allows certain individuals to develop as leaders within a particular community of financial services professionals. My motivation for entering the AET program was to understand this process better and to understand how I could help assist others in this process, and how I could help my organization develop the best possible professionals and leaders within their respective fields. In order to best illustrate how the AET program has impacted my personal and professional attitudes towards education and training as a whole, I thought it would be best to revisit my training philosophy. And not to belabor a point that I've covered previously, but I think that to outline my training philosophy that I've developed over the course of this program, the best way to do that would be to describe the themes of both humanism and pragmatism. And essentially what that means is taking a viewpoint that education and training has to be practical in nature. It has to be something that translates to a tangible result. But at the same time, the humanist aspect is making sure that these are that the content, that the nature of the training is something that is best suited to the individual, and that it is actually led by the individual. This is something that I think was greatly impacted as far as how I wanted to approach training within the context of my own organization. Typically speaking, organizational training involves taking an individual, establishing the organization's way for conducting business within the organization, and then installing skills and attitudes that best reflect that in the individual trainee. So this, in many ways, wouldn't appear to be highly compatible with a humanist training philosophy. Definitely pragmatic in nature, but certainly not tailored to the individual. This is something that I planned on exploring over the course of my time in the program, and certainly I was able to have the opportunity to do that. The process of understanding the learners that I would be impacting ultimately as a result of this program was not only essential, but it was really critical to understanding how I would be able to translate the skills and philosophies that I would learn in the AET program over into my organization. In order to best do that, I was fortunate enough to be able to participate in a qualitative study that essentially looked at the individual prospective participants in my organization's training program, how these individuals were able to take their respective backgrounds into their training program, what their motivations for participating in the training program, what they hope to get out of my organization's training, and ultimately what their aspirations were upon completing the organizational training. And what I was able to determine in that was not only was there a great deal of variety and diversity in terms of how people viewed our organization and our organization's training program, but how that training program impacted their perception of my organization's investment in them. This was immensely useful to me in terms of understanding how these individuals could best be serviced through my company's training program, and how the training program could essentially be augmented and built upon to better service these individuals. It was tremendously insightful. It ultimately changed from a very fundamental perspective my assessment of how our organization's training program was viewed by trainees, and ultimately how we could best proceed moving forward. So the question that I had to ask myself upon approaching the area of strategy and design is, how do you develop and design training that both meets clear training and organizational needs while also allowing prospective trainees to actually lead and direct where the training is going to go? This is a question that as I asked myself, I found myself having more questions about how you could successfully execute a training that accomplished both of these. I was able to take opportunities to develop different ideas, and around those ideas I came to the conclusion that organizations must first understand what their primary directive training needs are. Within that process, there obviously is room to allow prospective trainees to develop and initiate their own direction in accomplishing those goals. In order to do that, you must establish a sense of ownership within the trainee's own area of influence, so that they can understand that it is also in their best interest to meet these training needs. And in order for them to actually lead in that direction, the best possible strategy is to develop training around their own methods and means and talents in terms of accomplishing these training goals. So I've included here, an image that I've included previously, which basically breaks down, different steps in terms of, analysis and identification of training needs and how you can develop an action plan around those needs. Where my assessment differs from this process is that it also integrates in the opportunity to identify and reinforce these steps through establishing motivation and talents within the trainees themselves. This is something that becomes even more complex as you include the transition my organization has recently gone through towards a distance-based training structure. So I was really fortunate in that I was able to participate in this program as my organization was embarking on one of the most significant transitions in its history of its own training program. And that was the transition from a classroom to a distance-based training structure. This was, and this is not under an overstatement, this was a radical transformation in how my organization conducted training and the relationships that this redefined between trainer, trainee, and the trainee's respective work team. This was something that not only was significant for me in that it really forced me to reassess my own philosophies and my own strategies for how to conduct effective training, but also how to really reassess my role as a teammate and a leader within my organization, and how the transition to distance-based training would redefine that. And essentially it places the responsibility for creating an environment conducive to effective training, and also the content itself is incumbent upon teammates and managers to ensure that any trainee is receiving the optimal training experience. Ultimately, my experiences with not only this program, but with my observations of my organization's transition to distance-based training really led me to reconsider my definition of the word training. What was training? Was it the act of sitting in a classroom as a facilitator went over PowerPoint slides and showed you, the correct methods and standards for performing one's job? Was training sitting in your own office, observing your coworkers, being coached by your manager, understanding your own structure within your own team? And if that was the case, then what was the role of the trainer? Who was the trainer? Was the trainer the facilitator who was delivering content to you from an office several states away? Or is a trainer your coworker or your manager? These questions not only, empowered me to really reassess how I felt about this transition, but also helped me to understand that I could take what I learned in this program and apply it in a variety of capacities. And whether my official job title is that of a trainer or as a fellow banker or as a branch manager, I knew that I would be able to take what I learned here and deliver that in an enhanced role and with an enhanced theme that was geared towards helping, my training bankers become the best possible bankers, individuals that they could be. So I think this effectively begs the question of how I am going to be able to take the principles and concepts that I have acquired over the course of this program and apply them to both professional and personal contexts, not just today, but going forward. I think this is an especially critical question as the training programs within my own industry, and I think the industry itself, is in a state of significant transition. The principles that I have acquired are principles that I believe transcend where this industry has been and where it is going. I plan on continuing over the course of the next few years to develop my role as not only a banker, but as a leader, as a manager, in terms of how I approach personal and professional development. These are central themes to my ongoing development as a leader and as a training specialist. I also plan to establish, especially within the context of a distance-based learning structure, the role of the team itself. This is something that I don't believe has been well defined within our current training context, and something that I plan on paving a lot of pathways for over the next few years. Once I have developed these set of standards and a set of practices and guidelines that I think create an environment conducive to learning and training, I plan on taking that to the next step and helping that form a basis for my career as a trainer. Over the course of the next 10 years, I plan on establishing these practices into an overall training strategy that I believe can not only be the standard within my own organization, but within my industry overall. As I stated before, personal and professional development are central themes to myself as a leader within my organization, within my team, and within my community. I plan to continue moving forward with the learning process. I plan on continuing to develop my philosophies and strategies and apply them within the context of my professional environment, regardless of what role I may take. I would like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share with you my experiences over the course of the Adult Education and Training program, and I particularly appreciate the opportunity for personal and professional development that this program has offered me.